Hello, everyone. My name is Julissa Ruiz, and we are Group D. I will be introducing the agenda setting theory by Maxwell McCombs and Donald Shaw. According to the book on page 375, the idea of agenda setting first came around in 1972. This theory focused on the media and how people would turn to the media for answers, such as why the US was even in World War I. Throughout time, we have become more connected to the media, and it even affects how we think and what we think about other people, religions, countries, etc. The media can have such a great impact on us, like who we vote for the next president of the United States. The media lets us know about worldwide events, and truth is, we only know what the media presents to us, and it may not always be accurate. I know I always check on social media, specifically Twitter, for world news because social media is what makes things go viral. And when they do, the people who actually posted the video or the picture can say what really happened, and they don't necessarily imply things that may not be accurate. The agenda setting theory is seen as a basic approach to mass communication research. The hypothesis is intended to imply cause and effect relationships between the media and the viewers. As you can see in the picture, the reality and the media's reality lead to what the public sees as reality. Now, of course, we may not all have the same views or see things as the media is presenting it to us, but we all sort of get what we saw as reality and what the media presents as reality and create our own reality, or what we believe to be true. McCombs and Shaw did research on the media agenda by looking at broadcasts, magazines, and newspapers to find out the public agenda, or in other words, what was the most important to the public. Throughout each, they paid specific attention to whatever their main focus was. So, for example, for a newspaper, they would focus on the headline or a story that was at least 3 columns long. For TV, they would watch what was shown on TV and at what time. They wouldn't show big news at noon or at midnight when nobody would be watching TV. As for magazines, they would look at the opening story that had a full-length column.
Alright, class, my name is Nick, and I'm going to be talking more about the agenda setting theory. The first thing I'm going to talk about is what causes what. So, in the agenda setting hypothesis, McCombs and Shaw argue that the media is responsible for the public ordering of priorities. Basically, that just means that whatever the media's agenda is then affects voters or the public's agenda, and the public or voters only care about or know about what the media is putting out. Critics of the agenda setting hypothesis argue the opposite. They think voters or the public's agenda affects the media's agenda. The argument is basically that the media would never report on things voters or the public didn't already care about, so the media can't set an agenda. This is not true according to the book or the research. Basically, there was an experiment at Yale University that they did to establish the cause and effect chain of influence. So basically what they did was a group of political scientists gathered 3 different groups of people and had them watch the news together every night for 4 days straight. And these political scientists grouped together stories from the news about certain topics. So one group watched about pollution, another group about inflation, and a third about national defense. And then at the end of 4 nights, they had a survey asking these people, what do you think is the most important issue in the country or where you're from? And it turned out that all the people voted for whatever they saw on the news as the most important issue. This basically strengthened the argument McCombs and Shaw had, saying that the media sets the agenda and influences people in what they should think. Alright guys, now we're going to talk about who is most affected by the media. So now that we know McCombs and Shaw believe that everyone is affected by the media's agenda, whether big or small, we have to figure out who is most susceptible to the media's agenda. One of the things in the book that they were super clear about was that McCombs and Shaw didn't believe people were just robots waiting to be programmed, told what to believe, think, or say. But people had a different level of susceptibility. Is that a word? And that measurement or level was called index curiosity. Basically, index curiosity is a person's need for orientation. That just means the less a person knows about a certain subject or issue, the more willing or open they are to accept the media's agenda. So a quick example of that is, personally, I don't know much about Flint, Michigan, other than what I've heard from social media or the news, and that is that they have a really bad water problem, that the water's poisonous and dangerous, and that, according to me, that would be the biggest issue Flint, Michigan has. And so my index curiosity of Flint, Michigan would be high because I don't know much about the city or the place or the other issues going on. And that's about it. Alright guys, so the last thing I'm going to be talking about is framing. And I think James Tankard had the best definition, so I'll read that real quickly for you. So framing is the central organizing idea for news content that supplies a context and suggests what the issue is through the use of selection, emphasis, exclusion, and elaboration. So basically what this is saying is when the media goes to set an agenda, they'll specifically just talk about the issue they want you to hear about and leave out everything else. It's sort of like cropping a photo. An example of this, I'll use Flint, Michigan again. The media solely talks about the poisonous water in Flint, Michigan. That might be because it's the most important thing, but we don't know because that's all they say. So if there were other issues, let's say crime or drugs or something like that going on in Michigan, Flint, Michigan, we wouldn't know about it, or I wouldn't know about it because the media is framing the water issue so they can set the agenda.
Hi, my name is Janae, and I will be talking about not just what to think about, beyond opinion, and who sets the agenda for agenda setting theory. The first part on not just what to think about is that the media tells us which issues go together. So one example that the book gives is immigration and how immigration can be connected to multiple different issues such as education, welfare, government spending, education, foreign relations. So if you think about it, media sends signals about which issues go together. So the media is influencing the public's thoughts on issues. How often do you see that Trump comes out with a new tweet, or when a new virus comes out and everyone starts becoming more concerned? It's because the media has brought it to light and is telling us which issues we need to be concerned about. So on my next slide, I have Beyond Opinion, and that's where McComb actually presents several intriguing findings showing that the media also influences people's behaviors now and not just their opinion. One of these studies was when Craig Trimbo found that when stories about the flu continuously came out, more and more people went to the doctor for flu-like symptoms. meaning the amount of media coverage actually predicted how many doctor appointments there would be week to week. So this didn't increase how many people actually had the flu, but it did increase, once the media came out, how many people would be showing up to a doctor asking about if they had flu-like symptoms, believing that this is becoming a bigger issue. Another study also came out showing that the University of Pennsylvania had coverage about lots of violence and rape, and then the number of women applicants actually decreased. So more and more studies are coming out and showing the same conclusions, and these examples actually show how media is influencing people's behaviors and not just necessarily their opinions anymore. So who sets the agenda for the media? Journalists actually rely on multiple different sources to set the agenda. The first one is going to be other respected news organizations such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, and these larger organizations are actually going to come out with a story, and then smaller news organizations are going to report on them after they see that they did. The second is emerging media, which news often breaks from Twitter or discussion boards or blogs that you don't even think about. Partisan media such as Fox News, Huffington Post, or the political talk radio, anything that is partisan towards one way or the other politically, that comes out a lot. And then candidates and office holders, so the president or high-ranking officials will single-handedly set the agenda as soon as they come out and say something that they want to do, or they want to hold a new press release. They'll come out with that, and multiple news sources are going to want to pick up on it. Press releases, which is where public relation professionals will actually come up and draft press releases and actually send them to news outlets. And then the news outlets will take those and present on them and report on them how they would like to. And then we have interest aggregations. That would be things like the Tea Party or Black Lives Matter group, anything where a cluster of people who want to demand the center stage for their overriding concern, for their one overriding concern. So they pick one thing that they want the press to know about, and they will go on and on until the press starts reporting on them. And then the last one is gatekeepers. So editors actually work as gatekeepers who ultimately determine what gets published. So they really do set the agenda most of the time, just because they're the ones saying yes or no to things getting passed. And then interestingly enough, fake news has now appeared to be a new one that has been setting the agenda. Actually, fake news could hold power even if no one believes it at all, just because different news outlets start to pick up on the story of the fake news and start to report on that as well. So these are all the different ways of how journalists actually rely and come up with different sources to set the agenda. So thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Lauren Shockley, and I'm going to be covering the sections on Will Media Still Shape, Ethical Reflections, and the Critique. Starting with Will media still shape the agenda, opinions, and behavior? David has predicted that traditional media prints are more effective than the new electronic media prints. Studies have shown that we comprehend more with traditional newsprints. This is because there are not any other distractions and links to click on, like there is with contemporary media. Therefore, traditional media prints will not be taken over by the new media. The book states, by providing users with more content, choices, and control over exposure, new technologies may allow people to create personalized information environments that shut them off from larger flows of public information in a society. There are pros and cons to both of these types of media, but overall, traditional prints will not be taken over by the media. Which brings me into ethical reflections. Clifford Christians is the former director of the Institute of Communications Research at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He does not share the same values on the First Amendment compared to those around him. This leads him to believe that discovering the truth is still impossible if we are willing to examine the nature of our humanity. This means that mutuality is what he believes in, and he thinks that it will lead to the essence of humanness in creating more of a community. On Christians' behalf, he believes that the media needs to establish what is right and wrong through a moral perspective. If the media is able to execute this, then they will be fulfilling attributes that will lead to community among everyone. The critique: are the effects of these agenda-setting theories too limited, or is the scope too wide? McCombs and Shaw first proposed the agenda-setting theory and saw it as a breakthrough from the limited effects model, which held a high point in media research. The agenda-setting theory doesn't always work, but it does sometimes work. Agenda setting is not limited to the correspondence between topics that are similar. Thank you for listening to our presentation.